Arthur Jacob Spinney, this is just picking up where I left off on my objection to your response to my video. You mentioned three assumptions upon which you base your view of property. I own myself, I own my labor, and I own the produce of my labor. Now, I would have certain objections to that point of view, and I would say that it's rather shaky ground upon which to build a theory of property, or a view of property. First of all, I own myself. Well, that very sentence implies a difference between me and myself. I own myself, which I am myself. There's no ownership involved. So it's not a question of me owning anything. It's just I am. That sounds pedantic, but actually no, because you are talking about property here. It is ownership. It is important here. The only thing that I can say there is that you may be referring to my mind's ownership of my body. Okay, well that's fine, but even that's not really necessarily clear, because which one owns the other? Neither side can actually ignore the other. The body does what the brain says, but the body has demands that the brain simply has to accede to. If I refuse to eat, if I refuse to take shelter from the elements, if I refuse to sleep, the body simply refuses to function. Therefore, which is true? Do I own my body, or does my body own me? So again, the whole assumption, this might sound like I'm splitting hairs here, but actually I don't believe that I am at all, because we're talking about property. There is no proprietary relationship here between me and myself, or me and my body. Or even if there is, it's unclear as to who's actually got the reins. The second one is a little bit more cut and dried, I think. I own my labor. I can understand that. I own, my labor actually doesn't exist except for at the very second that I'm actually doing it, but since I'm the one that actually decides what I'm going to do with my hands or my brain, then yes, I'm the one that decides what gets produced, and I produce a commodity which then I can sell. So that I can understand, or I can keep it for myself. So that one I can understand, even though it is slightly problematical, because there is no actual tangible commodity there called labor, which I can actually say I own. Finally, you say that I own the produce of that labor. Well, the produce of that labor presumably is something tangible, my property, i.e. I build a snowman or a widget or something like that, and that widget is therefore mine. But the problem is, property never really exists in a vacuum. It only exists in a social context. In the social context, we've all agreed on what property is, and we've all agreed that we will respect that property. We have also agreed that we will create a system in which it is possible for people to produce. In other words, we don't all just sort of randomly take everything from each other. We've all agreed that, provided someone is producing something, that belongs to that person. But that's by no means the law of nature. That's by no means cut and dried. I own the produce of my labor. It doesn't work like that at all. I would actually add to something like that. You mentioned slavery also in another context in the same video. Owning the produce of your labor is not what prevents you from being a slave. For example, I'm a wage earner. I work in an office, and I have to be at a certain place at a certain time doing certain things at a certain time. Now, according to the ancient Greeks and Romans, that would have made me a slave. Regardless of whether or not I'm making a wage, a lot of slaves in the ancient world actually did make a wage, but that still does not negate the fact that they would have said that I was a slave. So you have to really be careful with that slave analogy, because it doesn't necessarily work out in all given circumstances. So as I say, there are serious problems with your with the assumptions upon which you based an entire series of objections to my video. And I presume, with assumptions as important as those, they're probably central to your entire philosophy of freedom and property. I might want to go back and have a look at those three if I were you, because you'll find out that if you examine them critically, they're not really all that accurate. Thank you.